Okay, we're live.
Great.
Strong Com Podcast. Com, C-O-M. If you've never been here before, my name is Aaron Dunn. Com, C-O-M. That's the root word that means together or in common. And I use that word as a springboard to talk about three subjects I'm very passionate about, three subjects that I enjoy helping other people with, and that would be communication, community building, and how those two things, when you put them together, build stronger company, whether that's the company that you're building, like a business, or the company that you keep, like people across from you in your circle, that kind of thing. And today I'm super excited to have a very, very, very strong guest. I don't know if there's another person more deserving to be here. I mean, everybody's deserving to be here. But as far as like the subjects that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about debate, speech and debate. And what a more timely time to talk about this than right now in the middle of the political debates. Govinda Das.
Hey, everybody. My name is Govinda Das. I am a graduate from the University of Texas at Austin. I was working as a teacher. Right now, I am focusing a lot on environmental organizations and trying to help people out. We are currently a volunteer organization, ARC Habitat Restoration, trying to do the process, go through the motions, become a nonprofit. And that's what I've been working on recently. But I do have a background in speech and debate. I was at the University of Texas at Austin. I was on the national championship team 3 years in a row. I have been around the block. I've helped students both in college and in high school with speech and debate. And this has been a real wacky season for politics right now.
Yeah.
And
we'll talk about that. So we're going to talk a little bit about all that. Get to know Govinda, of course. This podcast is all about communication, community, and really connecting people with people like yourself that are doing really cool things in the community. So we're going to talk about all that. I do want to be sure that you know that I'm putting on an event here at Tyler Innovation Pipeline to help people with communication, community building, as it applies to business. And it's called The Greatest Sales Secret of All Time. I hope you join me Thursday, October 15th, 7 p.m. You're invited. I'm going to give you the strategy, the techniques, the process to be a persistent and active engager of your prospects. Most salespeople, 85% of sales are made through the 5th and 12th contact, and about 75% of salespeople give up after the second. So it's really important. It's a very, very core tenet of all sales. So I'm going to help you do that in less than a week. So on Thursday. So if you're interested in joining, comment below or send me a message or visit strongmy.com/store. You can get your ticket, save your seat for 50% off. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to equip you with everything you need to do to take that $10 ticket and make it $10,000 by the end of the year. So that's my pitch. But we're going to get into the calm here. So, Govinda Das, you mentioned that you've got a, stellar background. And here's how this conversation started. Okay, so I made the mistake, like many of us do, in commenting on the debate. Anything political, it's like it's surefire to get attention.
yeah.
But it's also surefire to like stir up the ants and you're going to get bit somehow, you know what I mean? It's just inevitable. So I made this post. I watched the debate and I just had an opinion. I shared it. And then 70 comments later, we have everybody else sharing theirs. And you know the deal. But Govinda stood out to me because he said, as someone who has who studied speech and debate and has been on and coached 3 national championship teams, this is my opinion. And I'm like, okay, gonna listen to this guy, and I've got to have him on the show. So that's how all this came together. Not here to like debate each other because I'm probably going to be outclassed, to be honest. But that's how this came to be. So to do broader context, I guess you mentioned. So let's see. Hold on. before we jump in the 3 C's, because that's how I structure the podcast: communication, community, company. I want to dial into like a little bit who you are, why speech and debate, what makes that, what inspires you to like make that a field of study for yourself.
I think it was very fun. I think it was ninth grade in high school. We did this book report about totalitarian states of I had this really, really old school teacher, and she read Animal Farm. We read Animal Farm. It was very interesting. But and I think one of my classmates said something. I was like, that's just wrong. Like, that's just not, like, he said, I don't even remember what it was, but he said something. I was like, oh, that's not true. Like, and I was just like, that's not true. And I couldn't explain why, because like I had heard it, but I'm like, I'm ninth grade. I don't know what really is going on. So I knew that they were wrong, but I didn't know how. So kind of out of spite, I ended up joining the debate team. I ended up doing all this other stuff so I could learn more. And when I went to college, I did English and sociology as my field of study because I wanted to know like why people were wrong, and I wanted to explain why. But that's how I started. I very quickly realized that the answer is a little bit more complicated, and that's one of the reasons it made me more interested in speech and debate. Is like, okay, so how do we actually explain to somebody? How do we explain how to communicate effectively, and how do we do it in a way that actually makes both sides happy instead of like everybody mad?
Yeah.
Traditionally.
Yeah. That's an excellent reason to get into it. So, and that's we share that passion. You know, part of the reason I posted on there is because I do want to try and provide like a reasonable, unemotional take on things. You know what I mean? I think it's healthy to have debate, you know, but it can be so vicious. It can be so vicious. So, so that's a little bit why.
Here's to say, emotions have a place in debate. They really do. They're like one of the three, you know, like pathos, logos, ethos, right? Those are like
break those down real quick.
Okay, so like old Greek philosophy, pathos, you know, feelings, right? Like appeal to emotion. Logos, appeal to logic, appeal to reasoning. Ethos, appeal to authority. Like I'm saying, like I have a college degree, so listen to me about this thing. Or like in pathos, like I'm going to try to talk with you. Like, hey, like one person dying is too much. And then logos would be like, these people are gonna die anyway. So that's kind of how people treat those options. But all of those are very important to debate. The best debaters use all three. Like in every part of what they're doing. Yes,
and that is strong calm. That kind of trifecta when you can really put all three in. And we also the first time we met was in poetry,
right?
And I was impressed from your poem. I don't even remember what it was about, but we share some of the same style, because I like in poems to try and you know, all those things exist all the time in any debate,
right?
Whether you're conscious of it or not. And I try to like bake them in, even though I'm like, okay, what's the logos part? What's the pathos part? But I know that they're in there. They're ingredients.
It's funny because like people talk about poetry, like what's the difference between prose and poetry? Is that the poetry is supposed to be spoken and prose is written down, right? Like the original intention of nowadays people go crazy with what they do, and they make it almost like an essay, and they take stuff from prose. But originally, poetry was stuff that was spoken. Like the Bible is technically poetry. It was all spoken and then it was written down, right? So in a way, debate in itself is poetry. What we do when we're talking with one another, when we're trying to explain what we're feeling in the right way, even when like Biden goes, here's the deal, like that's part of his poetry, right?
Yes,
like he's trying to make this experience, he's trying to make you feel a certain way. So like they're not that different.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the best debaters I've met also did the event poetry.
Yeah.
So
yeah, some of the best poets I've met have a background in speech and debate, and it makes sense because you're playing with the mechanics of it. Man, we're already diving into the nerdy stuff, man. I love it. I love it. So, what makes you love it? Like you talked about what inspired you to get into it. What makes you like love it and stay in it?
What made me love it and stay in it is, so there are two. I stuck as I got further in, like at Tyler Junior College, I did speech and debate. And then when I went to the University of Texas, I stuck to individual events. Like I still have a lot of experience with debate, but I spent most of my time doing individual events. What I really liked about that is I could just give a speech and I could explain the facts, and there wouldn't be somebody who was like yelling at the other side as fast as possible.
Sure.
Because that's the other thing. Lots of people who do debate, their strategy of debate isn't necessarily to find common ground or to find truth. Their strategy to debate is to throw you off your game, to say things, to try to trip you up, to not let you get a word in, like very like try to like steer the conversation their way, as opposed to, you know, like doing what we would consider traditional debate, where we like finding a kind of truth. So I kind of strayed away from that. I did a lot of extemporaneous speaking, which you go into, so you get your topic, and then for 30 minutes you get to prep a speech on that topic, and you use sources and current events to create your speech. So like we'd have to cite like at minimum like 8 sources in a 7-minute speech that we had 30 minutes to prepare. And there was also an impromptu event, which is the same thing, but except for is you get 7 minutes total, including your prep time. So you get a quotation, and then you look at your quotation, and then you write down on a note card, and then you have 7 minutes to give a speech / prepare the speech.
Wow. To explain that, or
to explain it, or like give your own idea about it, or do your interpretation of what the quotation is, or so it's really a tour de force in BSing and also having to simultaneously know everything.
Yeah.
And it
sounds like politics.
Yeah. So, and that's more close to the style of speech and debate that they do on the stage. Like, it's not a real debate. Like Joe Biden and Donald Trump are not actually debating on anything. They have pre-written points that they've gone over with their staff, and
or not,
or like, allegedly,
I know what you mean. Yes,
allegedly, they have like points that they've gone over, and then they try to stick and like, unless like something crazy happens, like, you know, you just like say the other person's wrong before they start talking. But
yes,
that would never happen.
No, not in 2020. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. Please weigh in if you're watching. I would love to hear your comments about speech and debate, whatever questions you might have for Govinda, to be a good debater. We welcome those, of course. But one thing that you did say was, you mentioned that of just like what they're doing is not debate, and it is, but it also isn't. And like, I agree with you there. It's like, I think a lot of people, do you think, I'll frame it up this way. Do you think that, it's a false, it'll never go away, but do you think it's a false thing to try and declare a winner of the debate? Like,
yes, in a way, first of all, I like to point out how the kind of futility in this in a little bit, because I'll tell you who I thought lost the debate, and I think it was Mike Pence, and I don't think it's because of anything that he said. I think he lost the debate because a fly landed on him for 5 minutes.
That's very true.
That's the kind of point that we're at, right? It doesn't matter what they say or what we do. They're trying to look at sound bites. They're trying to find the memes. They're trying to find all these things like
what's the headline?
Yeah, what's the headline instead of the actual substantive issues. Like, it's not about like what they're doing, what Kamala Harris and what Mike Pence were doing. They were sending messages to their base to try to get them to go out and vote.
Exactly.
They were trying to stick to their own guns. They definitely clashed on a lot of things, because when one of you says like, oh, you killed millions of people, or you killed thousands of people, you can't just say like, no.
Right.
Like, but that's what they're doing, right? They're trying to go through this process and trying to deliver a message to their base, and that's why they sound so different, right? And also, I think like very particular one. My friend wrote a really good post about this. It was talking about like what we've seen. He also did speech and debate and what he's seen. And the way Kamala Harris was speaking is that she at any point could have just destroyed Mike Pence in the same way she did Biden in the debate, where she was just like, don't tell, like Biden brought up that thing about like his record on busing and busing. And she was like, I was on that bus and you're trying to tell me that these person on the other side, like, and so really destroyed him, like really, like he made him lose the Iowa caucus, basically, like absolutely dumpstered him. She could have done that to Mike Pence, but the thing is she did that for better or worse. I think it's when women get real like that, a lot of people don't like it, especially when the people that Joe Biden is trying to get to are like the people who are disaffected with Trump, but are still like, you know, middle-class white guys, people who voted for Trump in 2016. And that's just not like me, like making just like, that's what the statistics show. Like that demographic, and they're trying to get people over to that side. So if Kamala Harris went really far out, it probably would end up backfiring for them. And that's, I'm saying that is from a sexist place. That is sexist. That is racist. These are all those things. But the deal is, even if with all of that the case, she still has to accept it, or otherwise, like, that's what Joe Biden's campaign is like telling her, like, to play it cool so you don't so we don't come off this way, whether or not that's warranted or bad or good. Like, that's the reality of the situation. That's how she had to handle the debate.
Yeah. Do you think that that's the same way, like, Pence has to do, you know, like on the same token, Pence has to position himself as calm, cool, collected, definitely not like Trump. Like, you know what I mean? Like, please don't be him.
Exactly.
And that's why he's where he's at. You know what I mean? Exactly. Like, there's a definite reason why they chose Pence, who's like milk toast, very, very like calm, cool, collected. Like,
yeah, there's all kinds of sociological reasons on the both sides. The most interesting thing I heard from analysis out of the debate was that Mike Pence was posturing even further than 2020, saying that in case like Donald Trump fails or whatever, he can jump the ship with his integrity in check and kind of restore the Republican Party to like some sort of normalcy, and so he can be that figure, which I could definitely see. Like he was being, you know, Midwestern nice, you know.
Yeah.
Like, people, I mean, well, a lot of what people don't tell you about that Midwestern nice is that there's some mean bits down there.
Well, sure.
But he still had the decorum. He still had he sounded like a normal person. Like, he sounded like somebody you could sit and have a conversation with.
Yes.
And I even heard, the best thing I heard was that if this was a radio debate, Pence would have won.
Interesting.
But because of the fact that this was put on a thing and people saw all the stuff that Kamala had to deal with between the moderator and thing, and she kind of turned it around back in the end, so it made it a little bit more even, which I'm glad. There was a very.
Are you talking about time?
Yeah, time. I think it ended up balancing out in the end, but she was able to present herself in front of a camera really well, whereas Mike Pence was trying to run out the clock, and he was, like I said, he was so still that for 5 minutes he had a fly on his head.
Yeah.
And it's boring to see on TV. And Kamala Harris kind of feels like she was working with people to do more like emotional. So, because one of the things that she had I think we should go back to like the Kamala Harris campaign in the beginning, like when she was running as a Democrat, was that she put her sister on her campaign. They got all these young people that had all these ideas, but didn't exactly know what they were doing. So in a way, her staff kind of failed her and led her in this direction, which was not her base, not what she represented, and made her seem not like herself. And as time has gone on, like, I think they've kind of restored her image more of like, you know, how she actually is as a person. Like, this is the most personable I had seen Kamala Harris in a long time, because her issue on the campaign trail is that she wasn't doing live. She wasn't doing, like, you know, people go to coffee shops, people go all like in Iowa and all Idaho and all over to see like the voters. And then she wasn't doing the same amount of meetings as everybody else. And that might be on a part of her campaign's fault, or it might be because she's not. There were some thoughts that maybe she wasn't great at those types of engagements, and then so she's gotten a lot better at that. And I think that was the big thing. She was very personable. She really, I think her message was a whole lot more hopeful than Mike Pence, presumably. It was very even, though. I think the debate. I was concerned that maybe this would go off the rails. It didn't.
No, I wasn't really concerned that it would go off the rails at all. Like, I knew that because those two are very, like, remove Trump from everything and you've got normal, bland, basic, very, very boring politics again, you know? Yeah. And like, so like Trump is really the thorn in everybody's side at that point, his personality and how he delivers things. One thing I wanted to ask you about in the context of debate and talking about the political debate, you know, I understand as a viewer that what they're trying to do is control the time. Like, what aspect of debate is trying to force the clock and have a little bit more and control the time in that way? Because I know that is very important, especially in the first 20 minutes that most people are going to tune out. You know what I mean? So that's why they push to kind of go over to get their point across.
So here are the two ways that manifest. The first one is like what we saw with Mike Pence, where he answers all the questions really slowly,
right,
and stoically, and he takes things one word at a time.
Definitely.
Until eventually a minute has passed and now there's a fly on my head.
Sure.
And I'm going to keep talking like this. And time's done. All right, everybody. Next question's you, Kamala.
Right.
So you don't have to answer. Like, have you talked to the president about replacing him? He just doesn't have to answer that because he's like, well, I gotta say, I love working with the man. We talk about stuff all the time, and then like all of a sudden, like, don't have to answer this question anymore.
Right, and that's the same thing is like with the same question asked to Kamala, like. That's politics, and I think that's the most frustrating thing for people is that like there's direct questions that are asked and they know they're coming, but they have the talking point that just kind of somewhat relates to it.
Yeah,
and that's what they're going to give because I think they were asked the same question. They both really just kind of generalized whatever their point was, if it's a story or if it's pacing. Or whatever kind of ingredient they're going to do, they're going to like soak up the time and then make it kind of go away. But like, I don't know, that's the maddening thing for, I think, a lot of people, but it's part and parcel of what politics is all about.
Yeah. It's such a weird kind of, I don't want to say it's like a weird timeline to live in. Right. But I think what a lot of people don't realize about all of this and like how the Republican and Democratic Party aren't nearly as divided as people think. The way I like to think about this is it's almost like there's three parties, right? There's like a traditional liberal part, like traditional liberals, right? Which is not what we're thinking about when we think of in East Texas, when we think of liberals, like old school, like 1800s liberals, where it was like basically what kind of like Joe Biden or John McCain, or just like kind of middle of the road centrist. They take ideas from both sides, don't stray too far to one corner.
More liberty-minded liberals.
Yes, like the traditional, like the traditional definition of liberal. And then there's people on the very far right, and there's people on the I'm not to say very far right, but and more conservative, and then more. I don't even want to say liberal. I want to.
Well, you'd say progressive, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
It's so weird right now because.
Oh yeah, I know. Like the comments on this is gonna be great, but
yeah, people. And the thing is, neither, but like people, it's not like some it's not so clear cut, right? There are people on here who
spectrum
don't agree.
For sure.
Yeah, there are people on the left, very far left, that don't agree with each other. Like, you'd be surprised how many people on the far left really dislike Bernie Sanders and AOC. And like when you see people in the middle, like, oh wait, we've actually looked at policies, like, why did they pass the farm bill? Why did they reform NAFTA? Why did they do all of these things? Oh, wait, it's because most of the Democratic Party is also on board with these same things the Republicans want to pass. And the actual legislation that they pass isn't that much different. It mostly comes down to like social issues is where they differ.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have friends overseas and they talk about politics in the United States. It's like, you realize your parties are like all the same, right? I think the funniest joke my friend told me about that last debate was the one I was telling you about. I was like, well, I didn't think I really figured anything out about both parties except that both of them really love fracking.
Right. Yeah.
Like they're not that different. Like when Kamala Harris goes up and he's saying, criticizing like, oh, your environmental record, and she can't name his like a single actual thing that he's done to do. It's a lot, by the way. It's done a lot, but she doesn't actually know about those things. It was like, that's not what they're worried about. That's not what they were trying to debate. They're not actually trying to like, hey, global warming is an issue. Hey, all these other things. Like, we just believe in science is what they want to come across to the voters.
Right.
Even though, you know, like science says that maybe fracking might be like not the best thing, something you should definitely do in moderation.
Sure.
Right. As far as like, so it seems kind of like we've been putting the perception of like one party is like communist and one party are fascist. And it's like, that's not
right.
It's not accurate. Like, it's not accurate to the reality of what people believe. And it's a little crazy because I feel like I spent all my whole time trying to study this to help explain to people what this is. And I'll actually explain it. It's like, I don't worry. I study these textbooks. I can do all this. And then it's like, that's not true. Like, what? And it's like, yeah, it's not true. Like, yeah,
it is so frustrating sometimes because when you do know some, I don't know. It's like the more you know, the less it matters in a lot of ways, because really what we know about politics and how to resonate and how to create a movement and how to get buy-in and how to get people to identify with what you're about has very, 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 very little to do with whatever policy you've got, and more of what identity and what psychological and what belief system you've kind of operated in.
And I think one of the things is really funny, like when you talk about solutions to anything. I had this professor at my university in sociology, came from Korea, really like a public health expert, one of the biggest in her field. And she was like going through all this stuff, like, this is what we can do. Like, so like, these are the things, these are statistics we know about healthcare. Here are the things that are issues right now that the statistics show and that probably need to change. And then I remember I went to her after class when I was helping her with some papers, and I was like, so what do you think the solution is to all this? And then she looked at me, she's like, I don't know. I was like, what? It was like, I don't know. Like, we've been trying to figure this out. I don't know. Like, we're trying to figure it out. I got good recommendations. I had the data on this, this, and this, and this. But as far as implementation goes, like, we don't have any money. The government's not going to put it into power. Like, it's not going to, like,
yeah.
So even though we have these theoretical solutions, there's no avenue for it to go around. So even though we know all these things about healthcare and the statistics about basically everything in our society now, like, everything's on the internet.
Yeah, sure.
We can really,
the info is there.
The information is there, and it's there more than ever. And the Google, Facebook, they're all crunching those numbers, but the government's not using them.
I think it's because it's kind of, I always feel like it's unfair when a politician says, like, you know, they don't believe in science, when there's plenty of sciences working on things with, you know, whatever party. Like, it doesn't have to be whatever it is. But like, the thing that frustrates me is that, like, we think especially in an election year, people get so caught up in believing that whatever party is going to fix all the problems. And the thing is, we are so disconnected so many times, not only from like physical distance from federal government and how that works with the states and how that rolls out, but also just like the timing and all that kind of stuff. Because say it happens, well, we still have, balances of powers that are just going to lock this shit up forever. You know what I mean? Before it actually gets rolled out, and we'll see how it actually hatches out at the end. You know what I mean? Hopefully. Well, and that's really what it. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of what people are concerned about is that the United States has never had to deal with a situation. Like, I mean, there are a few times where like maybe Aaron Burr goes out into the wilderness and tries to start his own American empire in like Missouri or whatever, or like Latter-day Saints go out and they make the Legion of Nauvoo.
Yeah.
All Mormon people are gonna love that reference. But like all that stuff happens, right? But there's never been a serious time in the United States where we were all so connected like this.
True.
There's never been a time in the United States where the parties were so divided to the point of like nobody's tried to pack a Supreme Court like this, like ever.
Right.
Nobody has pushed the limit. Like people are like, oh, Obama started pushing the limits of what the presidency can do with executive orders, sure. And then Trump had took that presidency and like blown and like made it even bigger as far as like what the president has the capability to do.
Yeah.
And we're starting to realize a lot of what the Constitution, a lot of it was put in place was stuff that they updated over time. And the United States hasn't had a constitutional referendum in the longest time it's ever had.
Right.
So we're basically at this boiling point where the laws definitely need to be updated for modern times, but because there's some people that are concerned that if you did do a constitutional convention and you did try to change the Constitution, who knows what's going to happen then, right? Like,
oh man.
And then so we just in this really crazy scenario where nobody knows what could, like the chances are nothing's going to happen. That's probably the most likely, is that nothing happens, status quo stays the same. We wait till global warming comes and kicks us all out. Right. That's like our best case scenario.
We just count on Elon Musk to ship us to Mars, and Bezos to build a freaking space station so we can all just kind of.
I'd say that's the most likely scenario we face. Just the way everything's shaping up. However, that doesn't mean there's not a chance that
things boil over.
Things boil over.
Yeah, because like Nancy Pelosi's saying that she wants to put control of the Congress to remove presidents too. That is nuts too, in my opinion. But to move on a little bit and wrap up communication, I appreciate the theorizing about the political nature of today. But do you have any tips from your toolkit of speech and debate that you can share of like, hey, somebody's like coming in and saying, I just want to know like what are some constructive steps to like get my message across more effectively? Like, is there a particular kind of formula that you do, or like when you're sitting down to write a paper, like and create a case or what have you, like what kind of constructive or applicable things could you give to people?
So it's different for every person. I do like to think about it. It's like poetry in a way, because you need to find your own personal style of doing it. Like my way of debating might not necessarily be the best way for you to debate. Right. So what I try to do as like a coach is like find the core of like, how does this person communicate most effectively, and how do I make the best use of it? And usually, almost always, the number one thing we do is just be yourself. Like be yourself, be personal. A lot of people try to go up there and they do, well, I'm going to do my newscaster voice and I'm going to talk really loud about what I think is going on. But then really what people want to actually hear is like, hey man, here's the statistic. Here's this, like, I'm going to tell you a story. Like I would like tell a story to help build the pathos and like help with the emotion, but like mix it in with everything else. Right. But that only happens when you're being yourself. So if you try to be someone else, or you try to act like somebody else when you're speaking or debating, you usually just end up seeming like what that person is, and you become a stand-in. Like one of the big things now, like Obama is like what a lot of people build their speaking style on. Obama, I mean, I'm not no, come on. Obama's got a silky smooth, cool voice.
Oh yeah,
great speaker. One of the best speakers. Like. I can't name a modern president that could have as good speeches except for Ronald Reagan. And even then, he was an actor, so he was obviously going to give good speeches. That's why they put him on. And even then, he was kind of old, so he wasn't even like in it. Like, but other than
the
that,
charisma wasn't as sticky as Obama's. Yeah.
Yeah. Not as so really, I mean, Obama has this style of speaking, but don't just try to sound like Obama. Don't try just to sound like Ronald Reagan. Like, try to sound like yourself. That's why I feel like certain figures like AOC and Bernie Sanders are so successful, is because you might not like their politics, but like they're not BSing you. They really believe those things, and they are giving you their person. Like, Bernie Sanders does not speak like anybody else. He speaks like Bernie Sanders, and people make fun, and people even make fun of it for him. But that's like a benefit. There's no such publicity. There's no such thing as bad publicity. Well, actually,
there definitely can be. But I see what you're saying. Is that yeah? If you really got to hone in your own style of communication and be your full self unapologetically.
Yeah,
and that's exactly why Trump got elected as well. It's just like, man, you know what you're signing up for with this dude.
And I think that's what a lot of people feel like about Biden too. Like, at the end of the day, like, when you watch, like, I could barely watch the debate between Trump and Biden. I'm not gonna lie.
Nobody could.
It was awful, but at least you knew what you're getting into, because Joe Biden act like Joe Biden and Trump act like Trump, and it was kind of funny.
It was very funny. I think a lot of people were looking forward to it just to see what the differences are. Man, I don't know why we thought better of it. You know what I mean? Because you've got somebody pit bull on a short chain, and you got, I don't know, a really lazy, slow Eeyore type.
and I will say, he does. I think Joe Biden, when he has prepared speech, is really good. I think Trump threw him off his game because he does have a stutter. That doesn't mean you can't be an effective speaker. One of my best friends from speech and debate, who it's like an individual national champion, like really, really good. He has a stutter, and he won back-to-back in extemporaneous speaking.
Does he control it, or does he use it?
Well, it's just Biden was doing it, like, what, he would just pause and collect himself. That's it.
Gotcha.
Like that's it. I mean, that's it. And also, like, that's why a lot of people with stutters like go into speech and stuff, and why go into politics, just because they want to get past it. And I don't think Biden was that bad. I think if it was like a normal debate, he would have done fine. It's just, he's just kind of old and a little grumpy, and Trump is also old and grumpy, and it was like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Looking forward to the next one if it happens. Let's to use our time effectively here. Let's talk about community. So we'll get out of the politics and all this kind of stuff, and we can definitely integrate more communication within this, because you're one of the prominent ways, and one of the only ways that I know how you're contributing to this local community is through the Tyler Loop. So if you wanted to talk about your role there a little bit, and how you got involved, and then we can also talk about like the storytelling aspect too. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, so this summer I was a fellow at the Tyler Loop. I basically worked together to create this volunteer organization, which I'm doing all the paperwork to become a nonprofit. But I'm not going to count the chickens before they hatch.
Yeah.
But so I worked with them to get some public interest going. I've worked on several yards already. What we do is we plant native plants for like the birds and the bees, because it's called ark habitat restoration, because it's like the ark where he puts all the animals on the ship.
Yeah,
we're trying to do that, but with the animals native to here, like the birds and the hummingbirds and the bees and little insects. That will just make all of our lives better, just in general.
How does it make our lives better?
Less pests, less water use. You don't like mosquitoes, do you?
No, definitely not.
No, food, like, you need pollinators for food. Like, it's already hard to grow crops in this area. People don't realize that East Texas, it used to be a really great place to grow crops, but because of soil being used, cutting down the forest, and like not planting back the right trees, a lot of the soil is like not great. A lot of it's clay, it makes it hard to work with. So also, as pollinators, we use a lot of insecticides and stuff, especially with the stuff that they grow here, kind of Coors Longview and everywhere, and then coming up from the north, like from the big all the ag stuff. So there's a lot of runoff. There's a lot of insecticides come in. So the populations of insects here are not doing as great. If you anecdotally, you can talk to any person above the age of 60 and they'll be like, listen, like there used to be birds and animals and all these bugs everywhere. And now we don't see them anymore. And one of the reasons that is, as we've been building more and more, a lot of these meadows and native prairies that we have just disappear. And so we have less pollinators, and that's less food. That's less of everything, really. It just kind of makes nature get replaced by rats and fleas and ticks. And so instead of having a diverse ecosystem, you literally just have the parasites that live off of humans. I think and people don't realize that when they think about their outside. So I'm trying to save it for East Texas. So at the very least, if some kind of crazy event does happen, well, you know what? We'll have all of our animals will be cool. All of our guys will be fine.
Nice. So you go, like, who do you partner up with, and like how do people like reach out to you and work with you?
People recommend me. I'll give them my phone number, or they'll send me an email. And we'll go out to their property, look and see what they have. I'll usually have like a volunteer. We've been not having as many volunteers out right now because COVID stuff. A lot of the people asking for help are older and don't necessarily have the ability to like clean up their yards or whatever anymore. So we send us an email, we go and we we'll identify whatever native plants you have, and then we will try to help them grow more. We also have a stock of native seeds that we will just plant on your property for free. The only stipulation is we come back next year and we gather those seeds, take them somewhere else, and we basically just spread it out. So that way there's always a steady population of native seeds that are always available. That'll be in people's yards all around. So if anything happens, and then also they spread around naturally, like birds will come and take them and spread them. So, and it's been shown that this stuff like works even in a small scale. Like even if on your balcony you just had a pot full of native plants, it would still be beneficial.
Really?
So it's crazy the stuff you can do with it. It's just beneficial. It's nice. And it's cheap, and you don't need to water it.
Wow.
Because they're from here, so
they know how to thrive in this natural environment. So it's all about just kind of restoring what is taken away from just kind of population growth and all this other kind of stuff. And what scratches your itch about it? Like, why is that kind of a thing that you want to focus on?
Because nobody thinks about the bugs. They're like, people are like, I hate bugs. I want to kill all the bugs. No, don't do that. You literally need them. And nobody, like, I joke, I'm pro wasp. Everybody hates wasps. I love wasps. They're so cool. Like they pollinate flowers. People freak out because, like, they lay their eggs in pests. When they're like, oh, that's gross. The wasps come and they bust out like a chest hugger. And, but no, but that's good. That's good that they do that, because they're the only ones that kill those pests or those wasps. So I always say I'm pro wasp. Nobody thinks about the wasps. Somebody's got to think about the wasps.
Surely. Yeah. It's
it's the little guy.
It's the little guy. You need a hero. Yeah. That's interesting. I think that I think there is some kind of resurgence in people getting interested in nature because of our digital like lifestyles that we have. Like, I know for me, it's a big, I'll probably work out after this, and it's so different. Like, it's hard downtown because I live downtown. It's hard to get into nature down here. Like, you got to really travel somewhere, from downtown. But like, if I go to Rose Rudman, and just spend some time in the green, like, it is just such a, I don't know, it's just such a stress reliever.
Well, that's what I think is one of the most beautiful parts about North Tyler, is like they have all these really old trees that they built around and that they didn't cut down. A lot of these houses, they've been in people's families for a while now, and it would cost a lot to cut them down, or so they just left these trees up, and it's beautiful. Like some of the most beautiful landscapes in Tyler are in this north part of Tyler. It's like, it's amazing. Even my aunt lives in that that apartment complex over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so interesting. She has these mosses growing out from the bricks in her brickstone apartment, like
Mhm.
growing on the windows. And it's it's people like, oh, there's not a lot of nature. But if you look hard enough, there's actually little traces of it. Like,
Mhm.
have you seen those purple flowers that are growing all over the fences?
Yeah, I think so.
Those are
Mhm.
morning glories, and they're from here.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they hummingbirds love them, the bees love them. They smell really good, and those are just everywhere. Like if you look, you will find.
Yeah, it's a wildflower. Yeah.
Yeah, they're related to sweet potatoes. They're technically edible.
Fun fact. Whoa, no way,
Yeah.
dude. I'm gonna send you a picture of them before I eat it, and I'm gonna be like, are they good? Probably not. It tastes like grass.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So another thing I want to talk to you about connected to community is that Tyler Loop, like that. So that's the work that you're doing with them, and like how does that contribute to the Tyler Loop and their mission?
Well, I mean, the Tyler Loop's whole mission is to give a voice to people in our community, and I've born and raised. My whole joke was I was born in a log cabin in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
I was not. I was born at home. I was not born in a log cabin in the woods, but I was born in the woods, and it's kind of. So I grew up, but now as people are starting to move in, there used to be nobody who lived by us. Now all these people started moving in. They started cutting these trees. You know, it's kind of sad to see these places that you used to run around as a kid, pretending to be the crocodile hunter. You know, running around catching snakes, and now there's no snakes, there's no nothing because people are starting to move in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why it's important to just to continue the kind of the wild, really.
Yeah, I mean, and it can happen right in our backyards, and people are just like try to work with it instead of working against it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be so much easier. Also, it's here whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I've literally went outside. And I was like, back when it was that Borton near the Borton building, that whole area. I was walking past there. There was like this great a family of foxes were just walking past. I was like, wait a second, you're not supposed to be here.
Mm-hmm.
This is the city, but it was like late at night, so it's like they were just there anyway.
Yeah.
So there's so much life everywhere. Even in downtown, even around here, you would not even believe how many coyotes there are.
Yeah. It's and I drive to White Oak every day for work, and it's amazing how many deer are just like in the city. You know what I mean? And there's other cities that have a deer population, but I don't know. I think people enjoy that, even if it's a coyote. I think people enjoy to a certain extent, as long as they're not eating chickens. I know my dad would love to kill some coyotes because they've eaten his chickens quite a bit, but it's like, I don't know, there's something about it that's like, I'd rather have that problem than not have them at all.
It gets even crazier when you start to realize how much dog DNA is in that gene pool of those coyotes, which makes them more brazen. Like, they're not as scared of people, like they see. So it's all these little minor issues we don't think about are like really important. And if you built the city around it, like as far as like having green spaces, you could create like a little highway of all these green spaces, and then everybody wins. Like, wouldn't you like to go across the street and like sit down on a little bench and sit on the grass with your kids or something? Like that's nice.
Yeah, definitely.
That's something that people used to do around here back in the day. But now, what do people do? Take a picture by the wings, the angel wings.
Yes, yeah. Shout out to the wings of Tyler. But I think that, I don't know. Do you think that's a unique part of our generation of people? Do you think that there will eventually be a day that we put more funding into like kind of restoring the natural habitats of local communities like ours and like preserving them?
Honestly, one of the reasons I'm doing it is because I feel like the young people aren't going to do anything about it. Because I feel like this season I'm going to start taking classes with the master naturalists, and they're almost all older people. There's a few like me. One of my friends, Zane, she's also gotten into stuff like that.
But yeah, like I see what you're saying.
There's and when those older people go,
who's gonna be there?
Yeah. So I feel like it's kind of like my duty.
I love that.
because somebody's got to think about it, because somebody's got to care about global warming. Somebody's got to care, because I think it's so funny about all of. I'm not going to bring much into politics, but
No, it's fine.
all of them, both parties, everybody older than 50 in that's in politics, which is almost all of them,
Right.
they don't have skin in the game.
Mm.
Right? Especially around here, there's kind of this mentality that the rapture is going to happen soon. So, no, I'm mostly joking.
Yeah.
But just like that, they're getting older, and then so they don't really want to worry. Like, they've already spent their lives worrying about this stuff, and they just want to kick back and hang with their family and
Mm-hmm.
live their life, because in their opinion, like, like, I don't have much time left. I'm not going to be worried whether or not I'm recycling or
Sure.
how's the earth. That makes people scared.
Yeah. 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 I love that you said that, because the one of the reasons, one of the motivations, what I love doing on this podcast is highlighting people like yourself who look around and they say nobody's solving this problem, and then you take responsibility and you treat it as a duty. On my hat, on this hat, it says success is my duty, and like however you determine that success, it is your personal responsibility to make it happen, especially if you look around and you see that nobody else cares about it. Every cause has to have an advocate. And so I applaud you for that, because there's too many people who say, well, somebody else will do it.
And it's crazy, because the more and more I've talked to people, it's because people aren't even against. When you actually tell them the idea, they're like, wait a second, that's cool. I didn't know all this stuff. And then they get really into it. And they, like, I've had like friends who are developers who heard about this. It was like, wait, I don't have to spend all this money watering everything if it's just native plants and it's like good, like everybody wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when people are more aware of it, they kind of understand. There is this old, it's not a real psychological test, because it like broke a bunch of ethical rules. But it was like this whole thing was like, tell how evil somebody is, like, and like they have the guys like, I have this electric buzzer, I'm gonna tell you to push it, and then they play a fake shock, and then so
and the audio from the other room, they can't see the person, but they can hear them, and then they press the button and it's like a fake audio, but they are forced to make that decision,
and almost all of them just like do it anyway, right? Because you're getting somebody has power over you and they're telling you to do something, you know, like, but when they had somebody with them who was taking the test with them and it was like, I can't do this, they were also like, I can't do this, when they saw that somebody else was like pushing it. So I think a lot of it is people just assume nobody cares. I think I've had that with a lot of conversation with a lot of friends where people just think nobody cares. It was like, come on, like, there's no way that there's not anybody who cares. There's always going to be somebody who cares. And if you can find those people who really care and are willing to do stuff for the community, then stick with them.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're few and far between. It's like, this has not been easy. That's one of the reasons I think my dad gets so mad at me. He wants me to do grad school. It's because I don't want to do grad school. I want to do this. I want to work with the community. I want to do stuff for my community. And sometimes it feels like maybe the community doesn't care too much about what you're doing. But if there's anything I've learned from Tyler, Texas, you got to try to save somebody, even though they don't want to be saved.
Well said. I like that. That's funny. That's so funny. Awesome, man. So to transition, in the interest of time, company is the last C, and this is really just kind of like a free button, because this all has to do with each other. But to ask you directly, like how do you, like, this being a business podcast, how does that relate to business, and how do you, because you said you did it for free, so how does that become like a self-sustaining venture, more so than a kind of a nonprofit, kind of somebody needs to do it, so it needs to be done?
So this is you've chosen an interesting person to talk to about stuff like this, because one of the things I believe heavily in non business and like basically like civil society organizations. We used to have a lot like stuff like co-ops, right? Or stuff like nonprofits kind of are now. Like a nonprofit's still technically a business and how it runs, but the way that it operates is I'm not doing this for money. I don't. People keep telling me like, "Oh, you're making a nonprofit. You can make money off of that." Like that's not the point. Like I don't even necessarily want to stay on board with this forever. I'm trying to create this organization so this will last. And then the way that the organization is structured is what I think the future of business is shifting towards. If you look towards Elon Musk, is like doing stuff from the ground up and keeping all of your like building tall, like having your organization, your business, like controlling everything from every level instead of spreading it all around and trying to condense it into a working product. Instead, you kind of build it from scratch yourself.
Got it.
And that is harder. And it does take most of the time, it takes more capital, but there are ways that have worked in the past. Like when there's so much theory about this. Well, so what we know as capitalism, what we know as business was invented pretty recently. Like it shifted from mercantilism, and after mercantilism came capitalism. And like out of capitalism was happening with all these creations and all of these businesses that were being invented. Sorry, I lost track.
Keep on going, man.
So all these businesses that were being invented, all these things that were being created, nothing was ever like that before. So there were no breaks, right? They were putting children to work, right? Like they were, like people were dying, and like people like had company stores where you lived on these compounds, and then you worked on those compounds, and you ate at those compounds, and you bought food from your employer for the money they spent you. So really that like, so old school, early 1900s, late 1800s capitalism business was like almost feudalism. Like it was so close. Like you can really see the ties to feudalism, which made mercantilism, which made capitalism. And so even then we're still slowly trying to drift away from that. And a lot of that happened through trade, because mercantilism came from trade, capitalism came from trade. But now what people are like Elon Musk are doing, they are completely changing the system up. Right? Like he's developing his own vehicles from the ground up. Before you get like engine from Mexico, you get whatever from Japan, you'd all bring it together, you manufacture it like in Europe or America or China. But now when people are doing it all at once and people are tying everything together and they're able to control their product at every moment, like then you can reach efficiency. And that's going to be the point. That's the future of business. It is efficiency, because from our economic perspective, we've always looked at how much the capital's worth, like the amount of money it is to actually create more money. Then we went to labor to see the cost of labor, see how it affected it. And we never consider the cost of energy. So now all the energy and all of the resources we use into creating like this microphone, right? All the stuff that it's made of is like stuff that has come from all over the world. Like the rare earth elements that have been used to create it come from a country in Africa or Bolivia or like, all around the world. And so now that it's come together all at once, we've totally ignored this energy aspect of what we're creating, like the actual fuel it takes to create a microphone or to create a cup. And then so now the old supply system, as far as is starting to fall apart in a way, like the trade war with China is a big example. Like stuff is starting to change. If it's better or for worse, we don't know. But we do know the only way that you can really account for that is to create self-sufficiency in yourself. So with what I'm doing, the way my self-sufficiency is, I might be paying like $1,000 something for seeds right now through donations or through myself or whatever it takes to raise that money. But in the future, I mean, it's a seed. You plant it and then it grows, then it makes more seeds. So now I spend the capital to try to do this, but now I'm set. Like the equipment's not going to go bad for like a couple years, presumably.
Mhm.
I'll wait to see what the warranty says. But the seeds will keep going, and the seeds will keep growing. And if I'm doing this for free, and all these other people are doing it for free, the only exchange of service that I'm doing is I come and collect your seeds and spread them around more.
Mhm.
So it's less of a business. I'm less looking at a business perspective. I'm more looking at it from almost like an efficiency standpoint,
Mhm.
right? I'm sure I would love to make money. I'd love to have a business. I'd love to do all that. But what's important is getting the roots down. Because if you don't have the roots, then
There's nothing to grow.
there's nothing to grow. There's nothing to stand on. So I worked at a company called, I'll explain the story now that we have time. Let me get some water.
No, yeah, you're good. That's really interesting. Like I love how you're breaking down the concepts, and I think there is definite takeaways. Like we see the move happening in like Apple, for example, starting to move into developing their own chipsets and stuff like that. Instead of, they're actively getting to a point where they're trying to do that. What Elon has done is make everything in their own, way. Now that also comes at a greater price too. Like it demands a greater price. And I think that's kind of
that's the issue. That's the issue that the entire world is having right now between green technology, between regular technology, between food. Like it's getting more and more expensive, and we're not investing because investing the initial money to fix these problems costs a lot of money. So we're kind of just like, it's less expensive to not do anything and just live in the status quo, which is good. It works up until, a pandemic happens, or, like California catches on fire, or you get hit by a hurricane, and all of a sudden something that you are not control of pushes you out of line. Because I know this, because this is how I kind of felt like I was living my life. I was like, oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. This is awesome. And then something tragic happens to me. It's like my life is in shambles now. But really, I just wasn't prepared enough.
Right.
One of the best advice I had, my accountant friend told me, was that at our age, one of the best things you can have is liquid assets. Because if something happens to you, if you have your money into a savings account and then you can't take it out without a penalty, then like if something serious happens, like then you're kind of screwed, right? Like what if your dog gets, for some people it's like, what if your dog gets sick and you have to take it to the vet? For other people it's like, what if I get hit by a car like on my way to work because I do so many hours and do so much stuff.
Yeah. Good.
Sorry, this is actually business, because I did marketing for Verts Kebab. If you've heard, they used to be they changed names multiple times. I did marketing for them. I was a Verts foodie. So basically the company started, they were selling basically rip-off Mediterranean food out of smart cars. That was like their gimmick. Right? That's what they got famous for. And they opened up all these restaurants, and then they hired all these people, and they expanded. And they always put on their sales pitch, like, we're the fastest expanding restaurant company in the United States, yada, 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 yada. And they kept going. And I was working more with this organization. I was seeing what my teammates were doing, what the company was doing. I was like, this isn't going to work. I was getting paid a lot of money for what I was doing. And then the truth is, I was not getting paid for do much.
Yeah.
Like I was doing social engagements, I was doing booths, I was doing whatever, but the amount of effort I put in compared to teaching or any other, or even working as like a chef in a kitchen or working on the line, the workload was so much less. I was working less. I was getting paid more, and it didn't even work. 6 months, I was like, I can't do this. I'm quitting. This isn't working with my schedule. Because I had speech and debate stuff going on. And I was like, also, I don't like this company, so I left. 6 months later, they sold the company, changed the name, and it was so funny. they were from Austin, Texas. That's where they started. They opened up a shop in Manhattan, which, if anybody doesn't know about the restaurant industry, opening up a shop in Manhattan is almost always a bad idea because it's really expensive. You got a lot of competition, and also they're selling bootleg Mediterranean food in Manhattan, where you can just go to Halal Bros on the side of the street and get a much better version from some like guy who actually is like, you know,
doing it like he's a real deal.
Like he's a real deal. So businesses often, they don't think long term. Why? Because businesses aren't supposed to think long term. They're supposed to think about, how can I get the most money right now? That's how almost all of them operate.
I mean, I think the best businesses are going to think long term.
Yes, but what I'm going to say that, so as time has progressed, because back in the day you did like I said, like if it made the company money back in the day, they did it, no questions asked. Some companies are still like that, but more and more, as corporate social responsibility has become more talked about in the social circles, has become more prominent, these businesses are starting to look more towards the long term. And the long term is, if the government isn't going to take care of our employees, then we can. And that's why you see even stuff like McDonald's starting to pay people more. All these bigger companies are starting to pay people more. Not everyone, obviously not everyone, but more and more these companies are looking to invest in not just their product or their customers, but also their employees, because they've started to understand that a good employee makes a good company. Like in Google, like, you know, like nobody treats their employees better than Google. Like they literally have like break rooms, and they have their little space stone. You can go and you can get a lunch, and you can ride your bicycle, and it's just so peachy keen, hunky dory.
Yeah, that's how they sell it. Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously there are other aspects to that. It's not totally, but more and more people are starting to think about long term. Like when Domino's fills in those potholes. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like they understand that if they want to be around for much longer, right, when all this crazy stuff is happening, that they want to be the ones that seem like they're the ones who know what they're talking about.
Gotcha. So I think what I'm hearing from you and what you're saying is that to build a business, like you're more along the lines of, how can we invest in roots that are going to be, how are we going to invest in a business or create the roots that make this so self-sustaining that we don't have to depend on anybody else but the business itself or whatever else that we've invested in.
Yeah, because one of the things I like to say is I like jokingly say, like, my perfect world is everybody has food, everybody has shelter, everybody has water. All the stuff with businesses is like, you know, optional, right? To the point where you can, if you are disabled, and then you should not be you shouldn't be homeless and shouldn't be hungry just because you were born with cerebral palsy, right? So if those people are supported, that's good for everybody, because I think what a lot of people have started to realize, and especially a lot of these businesses, especially after this whole coronavirus thing, when people have more access to resources, they're more likely to spend those resources. And I mean, I can't tell you the last time a game console has been completely sold out in stores. I've tried to find a Switch everywhere, but you can't. They're completely sold out. That hasn't happened in such a long time. And like, video games are fun and everything, but but because people are getting more money from their coronavirus unemployment than they would with them working their normal job, it puts money back into the economy. And then this is making other businesses start to realize, like, oh, maybe we can pay a little bit more. Oh, maybe we can do this and this and this. And that's why the best companies right now are the ones that give stuff to their employees and give stuff to their customers. Amazon's got a lot of stuff going wrong right now. It has a lot of good stuff going on right now. Right? When people came out and said that they were treating their employees badly, in a lot of these places, they started paying them more.
Mhm.
They started giving them more benefits. They started doing all of these things. They're using Amazon as a platform to help smaller businesses. It gets a little tricky because obviously there are both sides to it. Amazon does plenty of bad things as much as it does good things, but that's like everything.
Yeah, and you can't build a great company with you can't build a great company with thousands and thousands of employees without being good to your employees.
Right.
And so, like, I think when we talked, through the thread and kind of circling it back, is just like a lot of times what we're seeing is that it is a particular media narrative, or if it bleeds, it leads, and those type of things happen, and we take on the perception that this money hungry company, this billionaire company or whatever doesn't take care of its employees. Look at this example that these people are shouting the fire alarm, and there's going to be the vocal minority that takes that, and then the media is going to spin it as much as they can, because there is a bunch of hatred for the billionaire class and all this kind of stuff, when in reality you can't build a good company without a lot of that particular infrastructure. Now, that's not to say that you can't. There's not room for improvement or things that should be done, or what I mean, like of course when there's pain, you definitely want to examine how you can fix the situation, and like you said, they've kind of made some adjustments or what have you. But I don't know, like it's one of those things where you gotta I don't know, like my only point there was just that these successful companies, and the point that you're making, I think, is just it takes investment, and you really have to build a strong company, build a strong business. You really have to take into consideration the whole idea of it, and really be sure that you're taking care of the whole person, because that essentially is what is going to get the job done.
Like the most successful businesses, like when we look at, I think one of my favorite examples was Tito's Vodka.
Mm-hmm.
It literally just started the guy just making it in his little garage. Then he got money, and he had money, and then he invested it, and he literally just did it all from scratch himself.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people do, and think the reason why a lot of businesses fail right now, like all over the local, small businesses, large businesses, they try to do too much too fast, or they try to hire somebody else to try to manage their business for them. And then they slowly start to realize it's your business. You can't necessarily just leave everything to somebody else. You need to be involved in that process. Otherwise, you don't know what kind of product you're making. And if you don't know what kind of product you're making, then you can't build those roots. You can't. It's like, I like to think of it like it's like a garden. You got to cultivate it. You got to slowly but surely. I think one of the things about this is one of the main things is that one of the stocks that's being invested the most right now in is water, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons, because when you think about what's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years, honestly, ask yourself, what's going to happen in the next 10 or 20 years?
Are you saying like water, like bottled water?
No, like wells in the ground,
okay,
like water drilling companies, right? But I think because we don't know what the world is going to look like in 10 or 20 years. Nobody does. That's how time works, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it's really hard to invest for the long term. But also we see that people who invest in the long term in situations like we're in right now, what happened in the Great Depression, what happened even in the Great Recession, there are people who lose a lot. There are also a lot of people who gain a lot during those times. This has been I thought this year started out awful with coronavirus, and everything was very, very bad for me financially. But as time has gone on, I've done very well financially now. And that's so I've managed to take advantage of the situation because I'm really good with computer stuff. So I'm taking this opportunity to advance myself. But not everybody has that opportunity. So if you expand the opportunity to everybody else, and if you do all these other things, like if the consumer, if the people, your customers, if they are doing well, you are doing well.
Indeed.
Yes. And then that's what a lot of the businesses are starting to do now. I think they can see the writing on the walls. Like, even Exxon believes in global warming, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they believe all this. I think the strategy now is to invest in the future, because we don't know what the future is going to hold exactly. But if we look at the data and we look at the science and we look at the trends in businesses and in our government and all factors of life, we're going into a very exciting time.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be different, but it's gonna be very exciting. The amount of stuff that we can get our technology to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are scientific advancements that we are on the cusp of getting that make things very interesting. Like for East Texas, what I think is very, very, very cool is we have one of the largest natural gas areas in the entire world.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're looking at things like hydrogen fuel, and we're looking like things like, so like the process of making steel, you can't make steel cost efficiently without coal.
Mm-hmm.
And you need steel for turbines, you need steel for boats, you need steel for all sorts of things that we need to build this green infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have that, but there is a way to do it with hydrogen technology. Like hydrogen fuel can also be hydrogen, like from natural gas is what the main thing is derived from. Hydrogen is from natural gas. So by using that hydrogen, you can melt steel, you can put it into like hydrogen fuel vehicles, hydrogen reactors, all of these technologies that are just like, they know how to do, they just don't know how to do it cost effectively. All of that technology, all that future technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was like could take place right here in East Texas. Like,
definitely. And that's why
perfect spot for it.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of, I come from, I shared this with you not too long ago, of just like fracking and, kind of come back to fracking and stuff, is just like, how that natural gas gets out of the ground. You know what I mean? Why it's so important to continue to invest in those type of technologies. There might be evidences and warnings and things that we need to pay attention to ensure that it does preserve the planet. But like, there's also like so much opportunity there. And that's why you see companies, it's not just that, most of the time, like when there is an opportunity, money follows those big innovations because of the type of change that it can make to everything else, like to the entire world. Like the reason Steve Jobs invested in making the phone a computer is because of the possibilities of when that happens at scale and the technology is perfected, right? So I think that there should still be an opportunity and an allowance to take those type of risks, to invest in technology, even if there are some unintended consequences or some things that might have some negative impacts, because there's so much opportunity to have such a big impact on how we can improve the lives of ourselves, the lives of our families, and the planet overall. You know what I mean? We got to figure out that perfect mix, and that's the challenge. Before I lose the thought, I heard a quote today, Grant Cardone. He said, "The future is the only thing that you can change."
Right.
And I was like, man, I never thought about it like in that way. Like, you can't change the past, and there's only so much you can do to change the present, which is take action. But like, the future is the thing that you can change, and so you have to really understand what you're going to invest in to make the change that you want to see happen. And so, to wrap it up a little bit, I'll wrap it up. Do you have an additional thought? No? So like, I just think about like you have to keep an eye on like the change that you want to make, and based on that change that you want to make, you've got to make that right investment. And that right investment is going to have some risks, going to have its own challenges, but to kind of get to your point about self-sufficiency, and what I love about that is that, like, you have to make that investment in yourself as well.
Right.
And like you said, you have to make investment in your business, continual investment. You have to plant the seed first. And it's like, well, will it grow? I don't know. Do I know enough about the natural habitat? Do I know that this is going to be a good fit for the ground that I'm putting it in? You know, if you're going to take a metaphor, and then continue nourishing it to get to the point that it's going to grow, and then, like you said, be self-sustaining. The thing that I think the biggest investment that you can make is in yourself and in your own skill set, because like you said, like because of the investment that you made in, you know, learning technology, new technologies, and you're able to see what the future might be and where things are trending, you're able to take advantage of that opportunity.
And it's so funny because a lot of these things, they are not new ideas. Like the idea of global warming was created as soon as they discovered oil, because they understood it was carbon. They understood that carbon dioxide had a warming effect on the atmosphere, even since the beginning. But like, you know, but then they were like, oh, that's going to make the world warmer. And they were all in Europe. And like, this sounds awesome. It's too cold here. And then now it's like, oh, Indonesia is moving its capital because Jakarta is underwater. Lagos is getting, the capital of Nigeria is getting moved. Like all these, like no, these people actually. And then now it's fun. Now the Europeans like, oh, it's too hot now. It's like,
yeah,
this is what you wanted. This is what you said at the beginning that you wanted. You said this would be cool.
Right. Yeah. You have to balance those unintended consequences. I'm not a global warming expert, so I'm not exactly sure, but great conversation, man.
That was awesome.
Really hope really enjoyed having you on the show.
No, it was really cool. It's very nice talking to you. It's very nice to see. I hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah,
it's a weird time.
Yeah. Be sure to follow AHRETX. That's ARC
Habitat Restoration.
ARC Habitat Restoration. Follow Govinda's journey, his path as he grows East Texas one seed at a time.
That's good.
Yeah, right. So that's what we do here at Strong Calm, you know. And you know, like Govinda said, you know, the only investment, you know, like the most worthwhile investment that you can make, and I believe this wholeheartedly as well, because I've seen the spoils that come out of it, is the investment that you make in yourself. And there's an opportunity to do that Thursday, October 15th at the Tyler Innovation Pipeline. Invest in your own future by discovering the power of follow-up, the greatest sales secret of all time. Just going to do a little selfish plug there.
Read a book.
Also read
any
a book. Yeah, any book. That's another thing, you know. So because, you know, the value of a book isn't the 10 or 20 bucks.
Yeah.
But it is the self-development, or the 10 to 20,000 bucks that you can get out of the knowledge that you gain out of it. So for the small price of a book, come to the event. And I'm pretty much going to give you a book. It's like 80 pages of stuff that you can apply the very, very next day. So anyway, thanks for listening to the show. I'll be back, I think, next week. I don't know. I'm all like, we always happen to, for the past like 5 or 6 Saturdays, have very strong guests. So
neat.
Yeah, it's awesome. So y'all have a good day.